Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes it is not the loud voices that disturb our peace, but the quiet ones, the ones that say nothing, yet change everything. There comes a moment in life when you notice a shift. People who once smiled now look away. Friends who once stood beside you begin to step back. And without warning, you become the target of silent resistance, invisible judgment, quiet hatred. But why does this happen? Today, we enter a topic that is uncomfortable yet necessary. Why people suddenly start hating you, the silent war you never see coming. This is not about blame, it is about awareness. It is about understanding human behavior, the fragile ego, and how your growth, your peace, can disturb others' unrest. It is about learning to stand still in the storm, to stay centered even when the world around you turns its back. When you begin to grow, whether mentally, emotionally, spiritually, or even professionally, you create a shift in the dynamic between you and the people around you. This shift is often unspoken, subtle, and rarely acknowledged directly. Yet it is deeply felt. The moment you start to pursue something greater, improve yourself, or break free from limiting patterns, you unknowingly place a mirror in front of others. This mirror reflects what they are not doing, what they could be doing, but aren't. And instead of feeling inspired, many feel threatened. Human beings are deeply wired for comfort and familiarity. When someone within their circle begins to change, evolve, or rise, it disrupts the emotional safety net that has been built within that relationship. You begin to act differently, think differently, speak differently, and even if you do not intend it, that change is often perceived as distance or rejection. The people who once resonated with your energy may now feel a disconnection because your vibration no longer matches theirs. In many cases, people do not consciously hate you. What they react to is the discomfort your progress brings to their sense of self. If they have been procrastinating, if they have stayed stuck in old habits, your growth silently exposes that. Not with judgment, not with arrogance, but simply by contrast. It is easier to criticize someone's transformation than to question one's own stagnation. And so, without confrontation, without a single argument, relationships begin to cool. People who once supported you may withdraw. They may even start speaking ill of you, not because you did something wrong, but because they cannot accept that you are doing something right. It is important to realize that growth is a choice, and not everyone is ready to make it. The moment you start to take responsibility for your life, take care of your health, set boundaries, or pursue dreams that others deem too risky or unrealistic, you disrupt the status quo. You change the narrative that people are comfortable with. And comfort, for many, is more valuable than truth. Your self-discipline may highlight their laziness. Your clarity may expose their confusion. Your courage may remind them of the fears they refuse to face. This phenomenon happens often in close circles, among friends, family, and longtime peers. These are people who have a memory of who you used to be. They may be emotionally attached to that version of you because it made them feel safe, seen, or superior. But as you grow, that image fades. You begin to take up space in a different way. Your presence challenges them to reevaluate themselves, and for some, that is simply too much to handle. The resentment may not always be loud. In fact, it is often passive, expressed through sarcasm, subtle avoidance, or disinterest. You may find that people stop cheering for you, they stop asking how you are doing, they avoid conversations about your achievements. Sometimes they even mock your new habits or ambitions under the guise of jokes. These are not random reactions. They are emotional responses rooted in comparison, insecurity, and an unwillingness to change. What is important to understand is that their reaction is not truly about you. It is about what you represent. You become a symbol of movement in a world that often resists it. You remind people that staying stuck is a choice. You represent the idea that things can be different, and that truth is too heavy for some to carry. Envy is one of the most silent yet powerful forces in human relationships. It rarely shows itself directly. Instead, it hides behind cold stares, passive-aggressive comments, or unexplained distance. When people begin to dislike you without a clear reason, one of the deepest and often unspoken causes is envy. This emotion doesn't always come from strangers or enemies. It often comes from those closest to you, friends, colleagues, even family members. The reason it's so silent is because envy is socially unacceptable to admit. Most people don't want to confront the fact that they feel lesser than someone else. So instead of acknowledging their envy, they project it as dislike or criticism. You might begin to notice that the same people who once supported you start to fall quiet when good things happen in your life. They no longer celebrate your wins. They seem uncomfortable when you speak confidently. They offer backhanded compliments or change the subject when you talk about your growth. What they're experiencing internally is the tension between admiration and resentment. On one hand, they may genuinely admire what you've accomplished. On the other hand, your success reminds them of what they haven't achieved. This contradiction creates internal discomfort, and rather than dealing with that discomfort, they begin to externalize it onto you. Unspoken envy shows itself most clearly when your progress breaks a pattern others are still stuck in. If you come from the same environment, the same struggles, the same limitations, and you rise, your rise becomes a threat to the belief that those limitations are permanent. People begin to question why you changed and they didn't. Rather than reflecting on their own choices, it's easier for them to dislike you. It protects their ego. It gives them a false sense of control. By diminishing you, even in their minds, they elevate themselves just enough to feel safe. This form of silent hatred isn't always active or intentional. It can exist even in those who care about you. That's what makes it so painful and confusing. You might feel a subtle shift in the energy of conversations. Where there was once warmth, there is now awkwardness. Where there was once support, there is now competition. You may try to figure out what you did wrong, but the truth is that you didn't do anything. You simply became a mirror they weren't ready to look into, and what that mirror reflects is not always pleasant. People rarely hate what they fully understand, but they often hate what they secretly wish they could be. The more quietly you grow, the more loudly their envy will respond, because you didn't just succeed, you succeeded without asking for permission. You became something they told themselves was not possible, and now your very presence forces them to confront their own limitations. This can feel like betrayal, especially if your growth challenges the unspoken agreements of your relationship. Maybe you all used to complain together, procrastinate together, feel stuck together. Now you've changed, and without saying a word, you've broken that bond. This is why envy doesn't need a reason to exist. It only needs contrast, and the greater the contrast between who you are and who others pretend to be, the more intense their silent dislike can become. People want success stories to come from strangers or from faraway places, not from someone they know, someone who lived the same life, walked the same path, and still managed to rise. It's easier to believe that certain things are out of reach than to accept that the only thing in the way is one's own inaction. When you break that illusion, even with grace, you become a threat to their comfort. Authenticity is a quiet power. It doesn't need to shout, impress, or compete. It simply exists, unapologetically, fully, and without masks. But in a world where so many people have learned to survive by hiding parts of themselves, by fitting in, by wearing roles that society expects of them, authenticity becomes dangerous, not because it does harm, but because it reveals truth. And truth, for those who have lived in illusion, is uncomfortable. When you begin to live in alignment with who you really are, when your words, actions, and values start to match, you automatically disrupt the illusions others have built around themselves. You no longer play along with the performance, you don't pretend to like what you dislike, you don't participate in gossip to feel accepted, you don't dim your light so others feel more comfortable. And this shift, though subtle, sends a powerful message that it is possible to live honestly without fear. For those who are not ready to do the same, your presence becomes unsettling. Many people operate from a place of emotional camouflage. They hide their insecurities with bravado, their fears with sarcasm, their pain with humor. They build identities based on what will get approval, what will avoid rejection, and what will make them feel significant. The moment someone steps outside of that game and simply chooses to be real, it challenges the very structure they've built their life around. Authenticity shines a light on the parts of others they've tried to keep in the dark. And so, the response is often resistance. This resistance doesn't always come in open criticism. It shows up in avoidance, in quiet judgment, in an unexplained shift in behavior. You may start to notice people pulling away, not because you've changed in a harmful way, but because you've become more true to yourself. That truth creates contrast, and in that contrast, people see the gap between who they are and who they pretend to be. Not everyone is ready to face that, and rather than confront their discomfort, they turn it toward you. Being authentic also means setting boundaries, speaking your truth, and no longer tolerating what once drained you. This change often exposes the conditional nature of many relationships. When you were easy to manage, agreeable, and willing to fit in, you were accepted. But the moment you start saying no, choosing solitude over shallow connection, or prioritizing your peace over pleasing others, you're labeled as difficult, selfish, or arrogant. These labels are often not a reflection of you. They're a reaction to the discomfort your authenticity brings to people who still live behind masks. People may begin to resent your ability to be yourself. They might not say it out loud, but they feel it deeply, because deep down everyone desires to live freely, to speak openly, to feel safe being who they are. When you do that without apology, you reflect what they've denied themselves. It's easier to hate the mirror than to change the reflection. That's why authenticity, though beautiful, often invites silent opposition. Even your silence becomes threatening when it carries self-assurance. Your peace disrupts their chaos. Your clarity makes their confusion feel sharper. Your honesty makes their pretending feel heavier. And so, without any intention of harm, you become a source of tension. Not because of who you are, but because of who they're afraid to become. The world often rewards conformity and punishes authenticity. Those who break free from this cycle often find themselves misunderstood, criticized, or excluded. Not because they are wrong, but because they are rare.